Another week in the NFL schedule is nearly complete, and Contending Football is back in the huddle. We're taking your phone calls at 855-908-5668 and reacting to the biggest stories from this week's games. Tweet us now at The Contender and catch the show after the fact as a podcast. Simulcasting on the Colorcast app and The Contender, this is Contending Football.
Good afternoon, everybody, and happy Halloween. Welcome into Week 8 of the NFL season. I am your host, James Flippin, and we'll be taking you up until the start of the 1 o'clock games here on the East Coast. Plenty of 1 o'clock games to dive into, and, of course, some 4 o'clock games on the slate as well. And if we have time, we'll get into that Sunday night football matchup, which everybody's watching and wondering, will Dak Prescott play? If you pay attention to the Vegas lines, if you're into the gambling aspect of things, you know, Vegas doesn't think Dak Prescott's going to play. I also tend to think Dak Prescott's not going to play. But we'll talk about that game. We'll talk about all the different games on the schedule. Like I said, it is Halloween. Our phone lines are open today. If you want to talk about anything to do with the football games, if you want to tell me what you're wearing for your costume this year, if you want to tell me what candy you're excited to give away to trick-or-treaters, as it seems as though we're back into the swing of things with trick-or-treating here in 2021, well, you can call us up, 855-908-5668, 855-908-5668. My name is James Flippin, and you're listening to Contending Football here on the Contender and on the Colorcast app. We're back on the Colorcast app, and we're excited about that. We had to get some things squared away technically before that could happen, but if you want to get involved with us on Colorcast, if you want to get involved with us here on the phone lines, 855-908-5668. We take you right up until the start of the games at 1 o'clock. And this is Contending Football. We're broadcasting on the Contender app. And if you're listening on the website, or again, if you're listening on Colorcast or YouTube or Facebook, however you may be finding us, we invite you to download the Contender app. And we broadcast both Chicago and DC sports content every single day, every single week. You can get that content if you download the app for free. Always commercial-free sports talk on the Contender. So again, like I said, my name is James. I'll be with you for the next hour as we get ready for this Week 8 of NFL action. Catching you up on some things we talked about last week. It looks like it's not going to be a go here on a Deshaun Watson trade as far as the 2021 season. Now, the trade deadline is not for another couple days, November 2nd, Tuesday, I should say. That's the actual trade deadline. But the rumors as of today are that Deshaun Watson really only waived his no-trade clause, or would waive his no-trade clause, to go to Miami. And Miami, as interested as they might be in making a trade happen for Deshaun Watson, the player wants to make sure they have some clarity on the legal issues before moving forward with a trade. And that's just not realistic. Nobody really knows what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson from a legal perspective. He's facing 22 lawsuits from women who accuse him of sexual impropriety, and that's a lot. Up until this point, there hasn't been any indication that, the NFL is ready to take their action as far as a disciplinary thing. They probably want to see what happens with the actual lawsuits. So the likelihood of any team kind of getting clarity on the Deshaun Watson situation is so small that the market for him is also seemingly pretty small. And then you combine that with the fact that we don't even really know what's going to happen once the lawsuits play out. Will he be looking at a long-term suspension? There was a rumor leading up to this weekend that maybe the Panthers were still in and that they had even dangled the thought of trading Christian McCaffrey for Deshaun Watson. Now, if you're the Texans, I don't really see how that makes a lot of sense. Oh, great. So basically we'll become like the Giants and have a guy who's got the skill set of a Saquon Barkley, but basically nothing else going on offensively. Or, from a Texans perspective, here's a guy that we're going to pay all this money to help us lose for the next 3 years. Again, it's a name that sounds kind of exciting, and from like a fantasy football perspective, you would understand the Texans saying, ooh, we could get Christian McCaffrey. But I don't really see how that would help them from a team building perspective. So the Dolphins were supposedly the only real option for Deshaun Watson here in season. Now, Caserio, the GM, supposedly wants to wait until the offseason to try to figure out how that market might expand a little bit for Watson. That also makes a lot of sense in terms of like trying to give it more time from a legal perspective to play out. So again, the Watson situation, very, very sticky, tough to really know what's going to happen for the player's immediate future from a legal perspective. And then he doesn't want to play in Houston anyway. Houston's not going to activate him this year. It's a lost year for Deshaun Watson, basically. A lost year of his career. Now, if he did what he's accused of doing, then it's his own fault. It's a lost year of his own fault, of his own making. But, any way you slice it, right in the prime of his career, despite being healthy, he's not playing. And we'll have to wait until this offseason to try to figure out. At least that's the rumor. There is still time here for something to happen. All these different, major players involved in the process leaking reports to oh, it's not going to happen. Oh, Christian McCaffrey. Oh, no, we're going to have to wait till the offseason. Anything can happen. But it feels right now like Deshaun Watson's not going to be happening here in the immediate future. 855-908-5668, 855-908-5668. This is Contending Football, and we're taking you up until the start of the 1 o'clock games. The Chiefs don't play until Monday night. These past few days, there's been some controversy with Chiefs safety, Tyrann Mathieu, who criticized the fans on an Instagram comment, basically said, oh, the Kansas City Chiefs fan base, is so crazy, or there's nothing crazier than the Chiefs fan base. Now, he came out sometime today or yesterday or whatever, and I guess apologized for making any kind of comments. But I'm struck by this trend lately. And it's surely not just football. As a Mets fan, I've seen it, trust me, with this past season, the players and the fans and kind of seemingly being at odds. A couple of weeks ago, we had Baker Mayfield's wife coming out and saying, Browns fans are so off base for criticizing Baker Mayfield in any way because of how much he's done to change the culture in Cleveland. And, some people came out and said, I don't even know who all these Browns fans are that are supposedly being so harsh on Baker Mayfield, but, whatever. But it's interesting to me, whenever you see athletes coming out and admonishing their fans in some way. And I'm not talking about like, oh, the crowd was really sparse today, or the crowd was quiet. Oh, the weather wasn't great, but we needed more energy out of the fans or something like that. You want to say something like that? I don't actually have any problem with it. That's different. And, with what I'm kind of laying out here and talking about in terms of like what it is to be an athlete and the interaction with the fans, I'm not talking about the concept of like having some troll on Twitter going nuts and saying, this person needs to, should be harassed and treated like garbage and all this kind of stuff. This person should have their life made miserable because of the bad game they had I'm going to go on Twitter, I'm going to go on Instagram and insult this guy and say awful things about his family and, oh, this person, I hope you get injured. I hope. That's not what I'm talking about. Obviously, those people are scum. And if they get clapped back on by an athlete, if an athlete says something to them, then, they deserved it, that type of thing. But to come out and criticize your fans and say, oh, this fan base is just the worst fan base in sport. Oh, they got to be the craziest, and not in a good way, right? Like not crazy in a good way. Like, basically mocking the fans for their fandom. I see this a lot. I feel like this is a very prevalent concept amongst the modern athlete. And I think it's because, the athlete, they think of we got some trick-or-treaters outside right now walking around. I hope they know that we do have candy here, by the way. If they're listening to Contending Football, they would know that we do. Athletes, the modern athlete, they seem to have like some level of contempt for the fan. And I think it's because they're not thinking about the fan as like a kid, for example, who's going to the game for the first time with their family and they're excited about football and they're getting into it. And, they're not thinking about that type of fan. They're thinking about the adult fan who screams at them at the stadium, who, goes on Twitter and says, oh, this team stinks. Again, not targeting anyone in particular, but just being nasty and sort of aggressive about the team itself. Someone who, is a fanatic. Someone who is an absolute diehard fan. Those people that, are diehard fans, right? That buy season tickets, that buy jerseys, that have 2 hats of the team, that have a bumper sticker on their car, that pay for DirecTV if they live out of market, all this kind of stuff. They're diehard fans. They're fanatics. But the thing is, those people are the reason why the modern athlete gets millions of dollars to play the game. It's really simple to me. Like it's really amazing to me that a guy like Matthew would come out and criticize his meal ticket, right? Like obviously the fact that he's good at football and the fact that he's talented and the fact that he has the talent and the toughness and the wherewithal and ability, all that kind of stuff, fortitude to play in the NFL and have done it for years. That's on him, and he deserves all the accolades for doing so. But the reason he's not doing it just for like exercise or to have something fun to do every now and then with his friends, the reason that it's a job is because there are fans out there who are desperate to see their team win. That's what they want. They just want to see their team win and live vicariously through that. That's what they're really driven by. So when you have the athlete that sort of shows that like thinly veiled contempt for the fan, it's moronic. I mean, I know there are like some punk rock musicians, right? Certain musicians, let's say, whatever. It's like part of their image, maybe, where they would maybe insult their fans or be above the fray somehow. I'm an artist, like all this kind of stuff. Fine. Okay. You could give somebody, but I mean, for the most part, right? Content creators, whatever it may be, a filmmaker, an actor, musician, an artist, someone who writes for a living, whether it be books or like op-ed pieces or something like that. They're content creators. Everybody's a content creator. A football player, is a content creator. They're creating content for their fans that they hope will attract those fans to then spend money. Be it through their eyeballs on a television set, be it through jerseys that are sold, merchandise, tickets, whatever it may be. So, just imagine, if you will, any given content creator insulting their fans, like mocking their fans for caring about the content that they create. I mean, it's a silly thought, really, but like, someone who, I don't know, draws cartoons for a living. And then someone comes out and says, oh, I didn't like the way this one was written, or, this story wasn't my favorite, or, I would have preferred something else. And then that artist comes out and says, well, you're just the craziest person I've ever heard of. You have no idea, basically what you're talking about. Again, in certain contexts, in a certain context, I should say, like one of those crazy, like free spirit type, people who love Kanye West, for example, almost sort of embrace the way that he is. And his sort of like, like I said, above the fray, kind of cut off from the rest of society, so other level. His fans kind of do embrace that, right? And I think when it comes to being like a true artist, in that sense of the word, you get some leeway there. And that's kind of what I was talking about when I tried to reference like punk rock or something like that. But by and large, you appreciate the people who are your fans. By and large, you embrace those people. And it seems to me like the modern athlete, and I don't know for sure if it's an outcropping of social media and like, the closeness that comes between fans and players, while at the same time, these players are kind of different level of celebrity and fame and earnings by and large. They're really, really big stars that are cut off from the rest of society once they reach that level of notoriety and achievement and compensation. So it's hard for them to, associate, I guess, with the common person. And yet that person's fanaticism and just desperate need to see your team win, that's what drives revenue in sports, basically. Now, like I said, as I referenced, targeting people on social media, or obviously, harassing someone at their home, or like, while they're getting out of their car or something, and, demanding an autograph and screaming in someone's face, attacking them in any way, shape, or form, beyond unacceptable. No question. But just being kind of like a difficult customer because you want to see your team win, that's what drives revenue. It's not fun when your team loses. Right? Like the Chicago Cubs are a rarity, and all the love to our Chicago fans. The Cubs are the rarity where it's like all good if the team loses. You know what I mean? All good, all good. And maybe some of that's even changed now that they've had, some success and won the World Series finally. But and plus everybody gets drunk at Wrigley, right? It's kind of like a big party where you just get drunk. So, but I will say this, going back to the original issue, and I can't exactly remember what player it was that actually started the talking point on social media, Instagram or whatever. It was someone else on the Chiefs. I can't remember who. Tyreek Hill, McCole Hardman, I don't know. somebody said something about, or maybe it was Travis Kelce, I don't know, made a comment, and then Matthew was the comment below it saying, "Oh, these fans." I will say, and this is where, in a way, I'm going to contradict what I was saying, but it's just if you listen to me long enough, if you get to know my particular mania as a sports observer, you'll get to understand where I'm coming from on this. Chiefs fans in particular do need to shut up, because you saw your team win a Super Bowl 2 years ago. Your team won the AFC Championship and was in the Super Bowl a year ago. You have, arguably the best quarterback in football, an all-time Hall of Fame head coach who, again, your team, I understand things have not started out so well this year, but I mean, you have no leg to stand on. I mean, a Chiefs fan right now just has no leg to stand on when it comes to complaining. And that's where I guess I could get, to an extent, a player being a bit frustrated with that. Because it's like, where do you come off complaining right now? But the bigger picture, the bigger story, that fanaticism, that desperate need for your team to win, or else it's not fun and you're not going to necessarily be involved in it at that point. That's what drives the big contracts. Because that's what drives the revenue. 855-908-5668. 855-908-5668. You can call us here on The Contender. Contending football on Halloween, and it's week 8 in the NFL. By the way, download our app on The Contender, and you can just search for that, The Contender with a K. Search for that in the App Store and Google Play. Wanted to mention a scary Halloween memory. Before we dive into this week's games, I wanted to mention a scary Halloween memory. This takes you back to Monday Night Football in 2011. The Chargers had started out 4-1 on the season. They were basically expected to kind of easily beat the Chiefs, who we spent a lot of time talking about. But of course, back then it was a much different Chiefs team. And so the Chargers had fallen behind. They were still the San Diego Chargers at that point. They'd fallen behind, but they'd fought back to tie the game. And, time was winding down. It was about a minute left to play. The Chargers had driven into field goal range, well within Nick Novak's field goal range. That was one of the years where Nate Kading got hurt somehow. I don't know if he tore his knee or something like that, but Nick Novak was kicking for the Chargers, and Rivers was looking to Phillip Rivers and the Chargers. They were going to, snap, take a knee, kind of get in the position where Nick Novak would feel good about kicking from whatever hash mark they wanted to get to. And again, a Halloween scary memory we talk about, because it turned into a nightmare for Phillip Rivers and the Chargers. And it's funny, connecting to recent times, that one of the voices we hear at the beginning of this clip, thinking back to that moment, is old friend John Gruden. John Gruden, when he was part of the Monday Night Football crew. So let's play this clip and talk about the nightmare that happened that Halloween night on Monday Night Football in 2011.
Exactly where Nick Novak wants to kick the game winner from. Phillip Rivers wants the ball. He wants the ball pulling away from the center. Let's see who's got it. Somebody's got to get in there and get a look at it, because it continues. There's been no signal. What a disaster. Kansas City came out with the ball. They're still looking in the pile. It is Chiefs ball. Unbelievable.
And what a nightmare for the San Diego Chargers and Phillip Rivers, as he fumbled the exchange with the center. The Chiefs were able to recover it, and wouldn't you know it, as those things tend to happen, the Chiefs went on to win in overtime. So a scary, scary memory for all Chargers fans. I guess a happy one for Chiefs fans. And we certainly hope for all you football fans out there that your particular fan base does not go through such a thing on this Halloween. 855-908-5668, 855-908-5668. You can be part of the show. You can also tweet us at The Contender and follow us there for a lot of our content. You know, we put up little clips from our shows and stuff like that. Plenty of football content here on The Contender. And let's get some news and notes going as we also talk game previews here for the 1 o'clock. Something that was a big headline when I opened up my phone this morning is that CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys has been getting fined left and right, supposedly, for little things that he's got going on, like with jersey malfunctions and stuff like that. I guess a couple of times his jersey wasn't tucked in. And then I guess maybe there was something with his sock height or something like that. You know, the socks have to be just so when it comes to these NFL jerseys. You know, I don't know. I haven't heard a lot about those recently. I thought maybe the NFL was getting a little more lax when it came to that kind of stuff. I mean, I feel like I see things that I wonder. Again, I notice kind of this kind of thing just from a quirky perspective, I guess. It just jumps out to me because I think back to those past fines for things like sock height and whether the jersey's tucked and all this kind of thing. But again, I feel like I see players that do different things. Like some of them wear just like, you know, spats on their shoes. And then others have like, you know, the socks that kind of really go up high. And I don't know. It's just interesting to me that was a big headline this morning. It's like, man, CeeDee Lamb must be really paying out a lot of money for that to be something they're going to write up. Let's see. He's been fined 5 times in the first 6 games of the season. So, I mean, that is pretty crazy. $5,000 for having his jersey untucked the first time, $15,000 for doing it the second time. If he has his jersey untucked a third time, it'll be a $46,000 fine. Wow. He was fined $5,000 for having socks that failed to cover his lower leg. And then he got a $10,000 fine for an illegal crackback block. At least that's not jersey related. How about this? Amari Cooper, Cowboys receiver, former first-round pick as well. Not of the Cowboys, but by the Raiders, then got traded, of course. He said to the fan in Dallas, "I've never seen a player so young get fined so much. He's gotten fined like every week. I'm like, do you like money? Do you like getting paid?" It's a good question. Hopefully they can get things squared away for CeeDee Lamb. I mean, at this point, if you're CeeDee Lamb, it'd be worth it to hire a guy for like, you know what? I don't even know how much you'd have to pay somebody, but $500, you know, would certainly be a better deal. Might even be worth it to pay him $1,000 a game and just say, you know, come into the locker room, or I'll step out, because I guess you can't probably come into the locker room, but I'll get dressed, go into the hallway there outside of, you know, Jerry World, somewhere where the fans aren't looking at you like it's a fishbowl or whatever. And you just kind of go through it with me. How are my sock height here? Is my jersey properly tucked? I mean, it'd be worth it. It'd be a good investment. Speaking of those Cowboys, Dak Prescott said to be a game time call, going to test out his calf ahead of Sunday Night Football tonight. But when we look at that game a little bit later, I'll mention and point out how I'm pretty sure Vegas is not looking at it as a game time call. Vegas seems to think that Dak's not going to play. And, you know, by and large, I think that's the smart move to sit him, because when you look at the NFC East, who's catching the Cowboys? Nobody. All right, let's dive into these 1 o'clock games. And look, if at any point you want to jump in and join us on the phone lines, it's 855-908-5668, 855-908-5668. And we'll start off with Panthers-Falcons. You know, the truth is, Sam Darnold, I feel, is kind of playing for his NFL life at this point. He was traded away by the Jets, with whom, you know, they had the most invested, first-round pick, the whole thing. They trade him to the Panthers, And the Panthers, I think they were looking at it as here's a chance. Here's a chance to get our franchise quarterback for a second-round pick. Because at times you'd seen that level of play from Sam Darnold, even in New York. You'd seen flashes where it was like, okay, this is a guy who could be the starting quarterback for a contending NFL team for about 10 years, let's say. A long career, a guy who could be that signal caller for a consistently winning team. And then, of course, it goes without saying that there's been plenty of no better day than Halloween to point out, when he was mic'd up against the New England Patriots and said, I'm seeing ghosts out there. I'm seeing ghosts out there. And, of course, that went viral on social media. But Sam Darnold right now, he's playing for his NFL life because I don't think he gets a third chance, certainly not as a starting quarterback. Maybe he can latch on somewhere as a backup if, he doesn't make a success of it here with the Carolina Panthers. But the notion that he's going to be resurrecting his career post this Carolina second chance is pretty thin. And the way that he's playing right now, after, they started out hot, right? The Panthers jumped out to a 3-0 start. We're looking pretty good doing it. Very strong defense. Felt like maybe they were going to be able to compete there a little bit in the NFC South. But it's gone all downhill since then. And, unfortunately, a lot of it's been Darnold. He had that game against Philadelphia where he really played poorly. The injury to Christian McCaffrey has kind of coincided, of course, with his not as good play. But having watched the Panthers play last week, because they played the Giants, I'm a Giants fan, and also the game was on here in the New York market, he looked bad. The footwork from a quarterback as a layman, as kind of like a common fan, I'm not going to be able to look at the really, detailed high levels of that. Like, oh, how well did he handle that half moon rollout or whatever, how well did he shuffle to this side or whatever on this particular option pass or something like that. Obviously that's not what I'm watching, but when it comes to just something as athletic as throwing a football, right? It's not that different. Some of the core motion from one thing in sports to another thing in sports. It's basically pretty similar, right? You got to have a good center of gravity and kind of drive your body forward towards whatever it is you're doing. Whether you're hitting a baseball, throwing a punch, making a tackle, diving into the water, whatever it may be, you got to have a good center of gravity and be moving towards the target, right? Well, last week, Sam Darnold, a couple of throws that he made, and one of them happened to be intercepted. What is he doing? He's doing is kind of he's fading away while throwing. His upper body and kind of his footwork, it's more like a jump shot, but like a fadeaway jump shot, right? He's not standing tall and kind of driving through the ground while he throws. And again, it's very noticeable. That's my point. My point is not to say that I'm some sort of major football observer here. And the broadcast was talking about it too. Mark Schlereth was saying, Tom Brady, Drew Brees talks about how important it is to have your legs, firmly planted in the ground or whatever it was, however he described it. But you see that Darnold's kind of fading back. And again, I don't necessarily think it was the kind of thing where he was afraid of being hit or, the pocket was collapsing and that's kind of why he was fading back. That would potentially be its own issue. But this was more where I think he's just kind of lost his mojo as a thrower right now. And if you think back to when the season started out really well for the Panthers and Darnold, I happen to know this from a fantasy football perspective. The way he was putting points on the board was actually rushing for touchdowns. This is not Lamar Jackson. This is a guy who could be, he can run a little bit. But the fadeaway footwork for Sam Darnold was really ugly. The Panthers don't have a, real better option right now. And supposedly they were kind of semi in on the whole Watson derby before that got shut down. And the word is that Deshaun Watson would not have waived his no trade clause for Carolina anyway. He was only willing to go to Miami. But Sam Darnold, he's got to reclaim his stance here. He's got to reclaim his status. And I'll tell you, they play the Falcons today. The Falcons defense obviously has been, by and large, not good. If Darnold doesn't go out there and throw for at least, somewhere in between 225, 250 yards, a touchdown or two, and if they don't at least, basically lose the game only because the defense didn't show up, then I don't know. One of these games, Sam Darnold has to play like a guy who's a first-round pick going up against a subpar defense. Because he certainly didn't do it last week against the Giants. And some people wanted to say after the fact, oh, well, he's coming back to New York. There's a lot of pressure there. He wants to perform, all that kind of thing. All right, maybe that's true. But then there's no excuse this week. And it's looking like it's going to be tougher for the Falcons. Calvin Ridley is out with a personal matter. I don't really know what that means, but I guess that's the point. He is out with a personal matter. So that's going to make it tougher and tougher for the Falcons. We do know that Cordarrelle Patterson will continue to be heavily involved in the offense. He will continue to eat, as they say. And Kyle Pitts' season appears to have arrived for the Atlanta Falcons. Kyle Pitts going over 100 yards receiving last week, I believe, in a big breakout game. And he's kind of been coming on now, has Kyle Pitts for Atlanta, the guy who, obviously drafted as a tight end out of Florida, but is really much more of a pass-catching talent, a guy who you want to get out and run up the seams and see what happens. The Falcons, by the way, are field goal favorites in this particular game. So, goes to show you, the Panthers, they're not impressing anybody. The Falcons aren't impressing anybody. Sam Darnold has to go out there and show that he's the guy. And this is a good week to do it. Staying with the 1 o'clock games, Dolphins, Bills up in Orchard Park. The Bills do not have Dawson Knox. He hurt his hand against the Tennessee Titans in that game that the Bills lost 2 weeks ago, Monday Night Football, because they were on the bye week last week. Here's the Dolphins' first game post. Of course, it's not officially closed yet, the Deshaun Watson thing, but, if you believe the rumors, it's not happening here in this season. So this is a chance for the Dolphins to kind of catch their breath, say, look, that whole situation's behind us. We're rolling with Tua. And, Tua Tagovailoa has been playing well. Tua's been playing well. Tua has been showing some things. And you want to talk about a guy like Sam Darnold. Here's a guy in Tua who maybe as much through injury and then also some ineffectiveness. He's got to prove that he's the guy going forward for Miami. And you don't get that involved and you don't get that advanced in the discussion for Deshaun Watson if Tua was playing, consistently, kind of like he is now. If he had been up until this point, the Watson discussion's largely moot. Now, I did say last week that pretty much every team should be willing to take that call if it's about Deshaun Watson, the legal issues notwithstanding. But you get my point. And a boost for Tua this week, Devontae Parker will be playing. Now, of course, Buffalo are 14-point favorites and coming off the bye and also a loss to the Titans. This is going to be a Bills team that at home is just chomping at the bit to make life absolutely miserable for the, what are they, 1-5 Miami? Either 1-5 or 1-6. So that's a lot of points to cover. I certainly wouldn't want to mess with that in a divisional game. Bills and Dolphins, but you got to figure that it's going to be an easy win anyway you slice it for Buffalo. 49ers Bears are Chicago fans closely watching this game. Potential matchup of young quarterbacks here, although Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get the start for San Francisco. It's starting to feel like it's Trey Lance any moment now. Trey Lance has been banged up a little bit. Obviously, so is Jimmy G. But, Trey Lance is going to be active today. Shanahan has talked about, wanting to kind of get him involved in the offense, maybe kind of some plays here and there, stuff like that. NFL.com, I think, had an article about this, like that Trey Lance is kind of coming on now as we get into the middle part of the season. And it's been a rough go of it lately for Jimmy Garoppolo. It's kind of come out now and become more clear that when Tom Brady was doing that interview a year ago, 2 years ago, I guess a year ago, where he was talking about his process as a free agent and the discussions, comes out that he was basically, willing to go to San Francisco and not even talk to any other teams if the 49ers were going to be okay with just bringing him in. He wasn't going to have to go on a whole, recruiting tour or anything like that. He was willing to go to San Francisco. And San Francisco more or less said, thanks, but no thanks. We're happy with what we got. And then you had that kind of now, infamous, I guess, clip of Brady, even though we never knew for sure who he was talking about, where he goes, "You're sticking with that mother, beep. You're sticking with that mother," So that's not so nice for Jimmy Garoppolo to be referred to as that mother by the best quarterback of all time. Also, then a recent interview with Martellus Bennett, Devin McCourty or Jason McCourty, I'm not sure which one. He has a talk show, and Martellus Bennett was a guest. And Martellus Bennett was kind of talking crap on Jimmy Garoppolo and suggesting that he was lacking some toughness somewhere in the past where, he was playing for New England and they needed Garoppolo to start, and Garoppolo couldn't make a start of it, had to sit out. Jacoby Brissett had to play. I think Jacoby Brissett had like a broken thumb or something like that. So Bennett was kind of like, questioning Garoppolo after the fact and saying he felt like he could have played. So that's not good. You never want to have your former player. And by the way, McCourty was laughing when Bennett was talking about that. So you never want to have your former teammates, talking crap on you. And then we had Dante Whitner, former 49er, who in the post game last week didn't like what he was hearing from Garoppolo. I have that clip here already, get that ready to go, where Whitner felt like Garoppolo's post game comments were lacking. I'll get that clip here. This is courtesy of NBC Sports, where the post-game show that they do talking about the 49ers. We'll cue this up here. The 49ers, of course, they lost to the Colts last week and let up 30 points in doing so. But, 18 points. Garoppolo didn't do anything special. So, he was kind of talking about, I guess, some of the offensive play selection or something after the fact. And Whitner didn't like what he was hearing from that. So here, let's cue this up.
And fix.
Yeah, and I hear a lot of excuses come out of Jimmy's mouth. Jimmy, we understand that. You've been saying that forever. We have to execute. Yeah, you can't throw the ball to the defense. You have to take care of the ball when you're in the pocket. You understand that the ball is slippery. You're holding it like nobody's going to tackle you. These are things that lead to losses. Turnovers directly correlate with wins and losses, and it correlates with the loss department.
So Dante Whitner kind of going after Garoppolo. Mike Shanahan, or Kyle Shanahan, I should say, not really giving a big vote of confidence this week with Garoppolo. Again, like I said, kind of indicating that we're going to see more of Trey Lance here as we get going, and that would make sense. High draft capital guy, all that kind of thing. And then again, it just taking L's here for Jimmy Garoppolo, just absolutely taking L's. And I'm not talking about the spelling of his name. He was on Monday Night Football. Tom Brady was on Monday Night Football, that sort of Eli and Peyton Manning alternate broadcast that they do, which I really enjoy. I've talked about it on the show. Tom Brady came on as like their guest during that. And they played a clip where I guess after the Super Bowl, where Malcolm Butler intercepted the pass from Russell Wilson at the goal line. And, they ruined the chance for the Seahawks to win back-to-back. Garoppolo was looking to celebrate with Brady on the sideline, and Brady just gave him the cold shoulder. And I guess Eli and Peyton were really having some fun with that and being like, oh, wow, you really dissed him. You really dissed him. And Brady just kind of was like, oh, sorry, I didn't say him. So the hits keep on coming for Jimmy Garoppolo. Will this be the last week that he is considered the San Francisco starter? Could be. But a game that the 49ers, you feel like they just absolutely have to win. They're favored by 4 points. One thing that's going to help them, left tackle Trent Williams, familiar to our WFT fans, Trent Williams will be playing. He is at least going to be active for San Francisco. There was some question there. Steelers Browns, always a classic matchup, always a game that is very hard hitting, and some good colors when it comes to Halloween as well. I got some orange, got some black, got some the yellow I guess is not really Halloween, but you get my point. Baker Mayfield is going to be playing. Now, I don't really understand what's going on with him. I thought they said he had like some sort of tear in his left shoulder. Now that's not his throwing shoulder. Mayfield's a righty thrower, but I really don't get how he's playing. But they talk about that it's kind of more just like limited range of motion for Mayfield. So, I mean, I guess it just seems to me like if you're going to play football, you're going to get tackled, you're going to fall on that left shoulder, or you're going to go to put your left arm out to steady yourself or stiff arm or something like that. I don't know. Seems to me that that's not going to be an easy situation for the Browns to navigate rest of the way, but they will have Case Keenum ready to go if Mayfield has to have any, if he has to come out of the game. Kareem Hunt still out for the Browns. I guess he's going to be out another week or maybe two. That's obviously kind of taken some of the air out of the, no pun intended, for the Browns running attack, but Nick Chubb and Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., both those guys are playing. So that 1-2 punch for the Browns, they hope that they can make an impact there. And then Jadeveon Clowney, also active for the Browns. And the Browns are favored in that game by 4, which I would have thought they'd be maybe favored by more than that. But, a divisional game, like we said, always tough to figure those divisional games. Eagles-Lions. Now, speaking of the injury report, Jamal Williams, the backup running back, the 1-2 punch for the Detroit Lions out of the backfield, he's out. DeAndre Swift continues to round into one of the league's, top running backs, really, it would seem. Running back issues for the Eagles. They put Miles Sanders on injured reserve, so it'll be Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott kind of filling the void there for Philadelphia. You got the Eagles favored by a field goal in that game. Can the Lions finally get into the win column? We will say. Rams-Texans. This is a game where you figure it's not going to be pretty. You've got David Johnson now starting for the Texans in the backfield. That was that whole situation where, Mark Ingram got traded. And it did not sit well with Brandon Cooks. Houston's wide receiver, Brandon Cooks. He basically came out and said, what the hell? Or what, this is BS on social media after this happened. And by the way, Ingram was traded back to the Saints, who, have some running back depth issues with Tony Jones' injury. So Cooks wasn't happy, basically came out and said, what the hell is going on here? This is crap. You got the whole Deshaun Watson situation hanging over head. Tyrod Taylor's not going to play. He's still not ready to come back. 16 points. Again, the Rams favored by 16 points in this. It feels like an absolutely outrageous amount of points in an NFL game, but it might not be wrong. I mean, look, this is a situation where this Texans team is so lost and reeling in every single way, really, that with as good as the Rams have looked this year, I could see them covering that. I think I'd rather bet that game at 16 points than Buffalo by 14. I really do, because I mean, again, I don't like any of those divisional games, and this Rams Texans game, I don't know. I could just see the Rams just absolutely blowing the doors off. I really could. Titans and Colts. We talked a little bit about the Colts before and Carson Wentz. He's been like kind of, just doing enough really for Indianapolis, as the Colts are a team that is built to succeed through Jonathan Taylor's success on the ground. And this Titans Colts game, if you like old school football and, teams that are built around their running back, this is the game for you, because you don't get much better than obviously Derrick Henry. And then, Jonathan Taylor is not far behind in terms of the pantheon of best young backs in this game. But, offenses that really want to run the ball. Kind of surprising in this day and age. But Julio Jones, again, inactive for Tennessee. And that's a situation that bears watching, because, unfortunately, the veteran Jones has just had difficulty staying on the field this year. And that's taken a big, sap out of the Titans offense, because A.J. Brown, he's finally starting to get healthy. But you really counted on Julio Jones being kind of that, take that offense to a next level type thing. And it just hasn't happened for them. Matter of fact, Corey Davis, who's had his own injury issues after signing with the Jets, he was much more productive last year for the Titans than obviously Jones has been. Although you could argue that's, mostly injury based. Bengals, Jets. We move on to Bengals, Jets. Just a few minutes left here in our Contending Football noon to 1 time slot. And by the way, you can join us on the phone lines, 855-908-5668, 855-908-5668. And download the Contender app. That's the Contender with a K. Search for the Contender app in the iPhone App Store or Google Play, and take us with you everywhere you go on your smartphone. You can get our cutting edge, always commercial-free sports talk 24/7. So this Bengals-Jets game, not a pretty one on paper. And, unfortunately, that's just kind of the reality for the Jets right now. Cincinnati has had a tremendous season up until this point. Everybody in Cincinnati is really feeling energized, hopeful. Maybe this could be the year that they finally kind of start to really right the ship there in Cincinnati. But the Jets fans obviously are in a much, much different place. Cincinnati favored by 11 points in this one. And they are playing in the Meadowlands at MetLife. I read a headline where they were talking about how the Jets hope Wilson can become Joe Burrow. And I guess, it's like one of those headlines where you're talking about young guys who were drafted, kind of 1 year, boom, boom, one right after another, as young quarterbacks. But it's like, yeah, duh, okay, what is the point of even writing that headline? Jets hope that this young quarterback, who's really, really good, they would like their young quarterback to be just like him. Okay. The issue is really Burrow showed much more so far. Looking at Wilson, Burrow showed much more his rookie year on a team that, maybe was more advanced. Now, of course, we're seeing the way the Bengals are playing this year, and you're thinking, okay, the Jets are not at that level. But that's the issue to me, is that, you want to make a comparison. Well, Burrow, up until his knee injury, and even before then, he was playing really well last year. Zach Wilson has shown, at times, maybe little flashes of top-level play. but nothing that makes you say like, oh yeah, here we go. This is our guy for sure. It just hasn't been there. Not to say that it can't be. I think every rookie quarterback and every young quarterback kind of takes their own arc, so to speak, towards, becoming a starter, a competitor, a level of play that you consider to be, acceptable for your team. All right, let's go through the 4:00 games really quickly. We're almost out of time here on Contending Football. My name is James Flippin, and you can follow The Contender on Twitter at The Contender. That's The Contender with a K. And download our app. The 4:00 games, Patriots, Chargers. We do know that Austin Eckler is playing. He's got a bad hip, but he is going to play. At least that's what they say. LA is favored by 4 in this game. So memories of some of those great matchups. Talk about, Phillip Rivers and fumbling and stuff like that. Patriots, Chargers, LA favored by 4. Jags, Seahawks. We found out this week that Russell Wilson is making progress from his finger injury. He got the stitches out this week. He had surgery on that. Kind of exploded a tendon in his finger. It's nasty to think about. But, one of those, he threw the ball and the hand came down on the player's helmet type deals. On the Seahawks side of things, we know that Shad Khan came out, the owner of the Jaguars, and gave Urban Meyer a vote of confidence, and that's despite the Jaguars 1-5 start. So if you're wondering if, it could be a quick exit for Urban Meyer here, looks like he kind of survived the whole bar young woman scandal thing, and he's making it out okay. Shad Khan indicating he's not getting ready to fire Meyer anytime soon, so got to be good for him. Seattle favored by 4 in that game, by the way. WFT and Broncos, for our WFT fans out there, they're just hoping that they can finally see the defense kind of get things right, and you would hope that against the Broncos that's possible, if not something you would even expect. One thing that's not so great for WFT in that respect is Jerry Jeudy is off IR now. And Sutton is playing for Denver at wide receiver. So they've got kind of their 1-2 punch back. And that's not a good thing for the WFT defense, but, they're going to have to rise up. Denver favored by 4 in that game. And then Bucks Saints divisional matchup. Tampa Bay 4-point favorites in this one. Kind of interesting. But again, you always got to respect those tough divisional games. And we shall see if anybody on the New Orleans offensive side can emerge other than Alvin Kamara, because up until this point, it's basically been Kamara all the time. Sunday Night Football, not a lot of time to get into it. We'll just kind of mention that Minnesota is only favored by 2.5 points. That feels to me like a Dak Prescott's going to be out type of line. You figure if Dak Prescott's playing and even close to full strength, they're going to be favored to beat Minnesota. So with Minnesota favored, I feel like that tells you Vegas doesn't expect Dak to play. He is supposed to test his calf in pregame warmups. So looks like there's at least a chance for that. We didn't get into our all-time Halloween team. I ran out of time, but just know this. If there was one tight end for the all-time Halloween team, it's got to be Boo Williams, right? Or maybe Dave the Ghost Casper of the Raiders. All right, that's all the time for the Contending Football Show. We'll see you next week. I'm James Flippin.